I'm Anthony Woodward. I'm CEO and one of the founders of RecordPoint. And with me today is my guest, Lucy Shelberg, and I'll get her to introduce herself in a second. But Lucy is one of the people I love coming to work with every day. She's one of our stellar records management consultants we have here at RecordPoint. Look, we really wanted to dive into the topic today. We had a whole bunch of feedback from our last Filed Live around really what's the relevance of Chat GPT, large language models, the new AI experience, a really deep dive into that in terms of its impact on records management and information governance. So I wanted to bring Lucy today because she's been doing a lot of thinking and a lot of research and brings a whole depth of experience in deep records management skills to really have that conversation and get your questions answered, around the changing world and the adaptation that we're needing to make around ChatGPT. But firstly, Lucy, how are you? How are things?
Great, I'm going well, thanks, Anthony. So for those who don't know me, I'm Lucy Shelberg. I've met some of you at RIMPA events and I've worked with a number of you over the years. I've been a record keeper for over 30 years and I've seen many changes in both the record keeping and the wider information management landscape. One of the most exciting changes for me has been the evolution of machine learning and the development and use of all of those different tools that can help us in this space.
No, fantastic. It's so great to have your expertise here. A couple of little bits of housekeeping today. We really want your questions and we really want to get that feedback and make sure we're answering the questions. Down in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen, there is a spot for asking questions. So, click on that, throw a question in. We have Jennifer Henkin, who is our marketing leader, our VP of marketing. She's going to act as a moderator and make sure that all of your questions are answered. I think ultimately she wanted to jump on this webinar because I wasn't doing a good enough job at making sure all the questions were answered. So she's really going to hold us to account. I'm only kidding. I think that's the case anyway. But Jen, did you want to introduce yourself very briefly?
Hi, everybody. Yep, I am VP of Marketing at RecordPoint. Really kind of oversee our global marketing operations and a lot of activities that kind of deliver value and content and education through to our audience, which is really important, and this webinar being one of them.
That's terrific. So please dive in, ask questions. Yeah. We're here to try and answer them and demystify the area of large language models and ChatGPT. So to jump right in, though, Lucy, I certainly have some questions of you that I'd like to ask.
Sure.
In this new ChatGPT world, in the new way of doing things, and let's be frank, some of those things are not as new as they sound. They're just new kind of marketing buzzwords and things that challenge us a little bit. But we've been doing AI and machine learning here at RecordPoint for a while. When others now in the industry that are doing it as well. When we think about classification and sentiment analysis and entity recognition, where do you see this going? Where does ChatGPT take us over and beyond the kind of machine learning that we've been working with for a while?
I think it provides us with another tool set in our landscape of tool sets that we haven't had before. It gives us a lot of ammunition, if you like, to do things smarter. We used to do them, I guess, I would say in our previous lives in ages gone by. We've probably worked harder and now we can work smarter with all of these tools that are at our disposal.
No, that's great. And so you just see this as a continuing evolution of the automation of things?
Absolutely. I believe anyway, that there'll always be a place for people like myself and all of those on the call today, the record keepers, because there's still that human element. We still need to develop the strategies and all of those kinds of things for our organization. But the things that I would call, in inverted commas, grunt work, a lot of that can be done by the different machine learning opportunities that are out there.
Do you have an example of that that maybe we can use ChatGPT for to automate these things, to give an audience of a real flavor of how it works as a tool?
Let's do that. So what I've got here is I've got the Chat GPT box up. And what I'm going to do, first of all, is I've got a couple of examples here that I want to share with you today. But first of all, I know that there's a couple of people maybe from within the banking industry on our call today. So I'm going to create a business classification scheme for the banking industry in Australia. Let's do that right now. But think about how long in the past it would have taken you to create a business classification scheme. Like many of you know that before I worked at RecordPoint, that I was known quite well for creating business classification schemes and retention and disposal schedules for organizations. And ordinarily, that would have taken weeks, if not months, to even get to a starting point to go out and do analysis or workshops with our business. You can see here, I've typed that in, and within seconds, I have gotten a really good starting point. It's by no means my end point, but it's a great starting point. And I could take this away, copy this out into another document, take that away and start to make that more relevant to my own business. So that's a business classification scheme. By the same token, I can now go and create the supporting retention and disposal schedule. So create me a and here we have within mere seconds the startings of a retention and disposal schedule. By all means, this is not going to be complete, and I would definitely not take all of the information that's in here as gospel, but I would use it definitely as my starting point and go away and make sure that the legislation and the nuances of my own organization are reflected within here. But as you can see, there's like days, weeks, even months of work has taken place in mere seconds. So like I said earlier, it's about working smarter, not harder with these tools.
No, that's fantastic. And, I think one of the things that's very important, and we showed this in our previous webinar with Jason when we talked about large language models and Chat GPT, is that these things are now becoming integrated into tools like our own and other platforms that are out there. So go back and have a look at the previous Ask Me Anything webinar on Chat GPT if you get a chance, on large language models. It's probably worth explaining, Lucy, that, this same prompt type process that you've taken with Chat GPT could really be done with any large language model, couldn't it? Whether that's Bard or, yeah.
Absolutely. Any of the different types of tools that are out there, this is definitely, this is just a starting point.
And I think
you can also, oh, sorry, Anthony.
No, yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
I was just going to say also with that, what I didn't describe here was that you can actually take it further. So you can say, I did one the other day where I was just practicing, and I said I wanted a records officer position description for RecordPoint, and it came up with a general records officer role, what I would do as a records officer at RecordPoint. But then I gave it more information after that and said, no, this person is actually going to be talking to clients on behalf of RecordPoint as a records officer. And so it went and changed the position description to have different language in it for that particular purpose. So you can talk to the machine and get it to help you refine what you're looking for.
No, and I think that's really fantastic in terms of there's some real value in that refining of each of the questions you're asked and building those processes. As you said, it does come with the necessity, though, to review what's coming back out of the machine, doesn't it?
Absolutely, because it's generic, right? It's not going to be specific to your organization's needs. As we all know, every organization has its own nuances, its own quirks that or different pieces of information or tasks that it does that might be slightly different to other organizations or done in a particular way. And so those items are not going to be reflected in something that's generic like this, but it's a really great starting point to start that process, so that then you can go and refine it with those other little nuances, which take, 5-10 minutes instead of 5-10 weeks.
No, fantastic. And I guess what's really great about this is when you get to the specificity. For instance, we want to update a particular leaf node in our file plan business classification scheme, depending on what jurisdiction you're in. We can really get some depth around that. We can really look at what are the citations, what's linked to that particular function activity. That's a real help, isn't it?
Absolutely. They're the kinds of things that traditionally took days, weeks, sometimes even months, trying to get the right people in the room to discuss those sorts of things. Now you can create it all and just take to them and go, okay, what's not here? What are we missing? And all of those things are already there for you.
No, fantastic. Now, I think one of the other things that I'm not going to ask you to demo this today, but for any of the audience that might like to see this, we can certainly have Lucy come back in another time and do it, or certainly help show you one-to-one. Chat GPT is really good also at understanding sentiment and entity recognition, which is a whole other area. But really knowing what's inside those records is a really interesting element of the large language models out there, and we're certainly seeing that application, aren't we?
Oh, absolutely. We see that even in our own product at RecordPoint with our classification intelligence offerings, the speed at which the machine can learn what's inside records and how to classify them is an amazing. It's just amazing. Blows my mind every day I come to work.
It's probably noting, though, that whilst it's very good at understanding, the context of information, answering, plain English language, it does come with some caveats. Large language models, Chat GPT, Bard, whatever those flavors are, does have some caveats. What have you run into around using large language models and the problems that exist out there?
Absolutely.
That we should think about.
Well, first of all, I guess the first one that comes to mind is that they are not always up to date. So they're not up to date to today. So Chat GPT, for example, is only up to date, I think, to 2021 or something like that. So if you're creating a retention and disposal schedule, any legislation or any sort of compliance things that have changed in the past couple of years since that, they won't be reflected in any retention schedules that Chat GPT might help you build. So you'll always have to go away and look at, take those things into consideration. Different models have different time periods when they've been cut off. So you've got to think about those sort of things as a starting point anyway.
Yeah, and there's some real tips. I think we've also seen, that large language models are not a search engine. They're not a way, I really wouldn't trust them to generate a document that needs to be used, like a contract or something of that ilk, because there is still a human input needed for those things to really understand the context.
Absolutely. I guess they give you the content, but not always that context, which is what record keepers are all about, is about the context. So, so they do that.
And the other thing that we've observed, as we've been thinking about the utility of them, and look, there is planning, and we're very excited about large language models and ChatGPT, but is that they're not very good at provenance, are they? They really don't understand the timeline of history and the events that stack things up. That is very black and white.
That's because they're a computer, Anthony. So they don't think like a human, and they don't have that, although they try very hard, they don't have that emotional or that objectivity, I guess, around things. They don't have the subjectivity. So they're just very, like you say, black and white.
No, absolutely. When you think about, and again, in the work we've been doing, what do you really see as the best practices about being able to leverage these types of technologies?
I think that the best practices are to use them as much as possible, but always make sure that you back it up with your research, your own research at the back end of that, because, like we just mentioned, these items, they have a date. Usually a date expiry on them, which is like, a couple of years maybe. So you've always got to make sure that whatever it is that you're doing for your purposes, that it fits that. It will give you very generic. It'll start off with the generic, but it takes all of that time away. So you don't have those time pressures to get things done. You'll be able to work smarter because you've got these things, and it allows you then to go away and do more sophisticated research very quickly.
Yeah, and I liken it a lot to bringing a consultant in to help doing that work, but they operate, hopefully, the Chat GPT and the machines operate 24/7 and generally for a lot less. But in the same way, when you get a consultant to do work for you, you can't just go then and present that to the board, right? You do need to check it. You do need to quantify that. You need to ask questions about it. Is this actually accurate? Did the consultant's context get it right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Check that it's not a rinse and repeat from something that they've done before. Absolutely. And that is exactly what Chat GPT and other programs like that are. They're just a rinse and repeat of what they've done before.
Which then does come with some problems around things like biases and hallucinations, which you'll see a lot talked about in the press. To some extent, I think some of the fear mongering is a little overdone about the hallucinating, but this is a very new technology. I don't know, Lucy, have you seen some hallucinations out there for the audience that might define the hallucinations process? If not, I've got one.
No, I don't, Anthony, but if you've got one, that'd be great.
Yeah, no, absolutely. There was a really famous one, and I think most people probably came across it around a lawyer here in the US used ChatGPT to actually create a series of filings for court, and ChatGPT was trying to be extremely helpful for the questions he was asking, and it actually made up particular precedents and legislation that didn't exist. We'll put a link to this in our information that we package up in terms when the webinar recording goes out, so you can have a read of the article. And I believe if you do subscribe, small plug here, to our filed newsletter, we did reference it in one of the newsletters we put out, and we'll go back and grab that. But and please do subscribe if you don't subscribe. But that hallucination does occur. There's been some tuning of the model since then. That was about 6 months ago. But because of the mathematics of how the prompt works, it actually is biased to wanting to answer your question. Hence, it can confuse itself with things that aren't true facts. But that will get better over time. You do need to check it. I think that's the big takeaway. But you saw in what Lucy did there how fast that was. Such quick results for checking. Switching gears a little bit. If you were to think into the future a little bit, Lucy, again with the work you've been doing and the thinking we've had, where do you think the biggest impacts for large language models will be to records management over the next 12, 18 months, 2 years?
I think we're already quite well within that space for some areas, and that includes doing record keeping by stealth. So taking record keeping away from our general user community. We don't want them to be record keepers. It was a mistake we made in the past, asking everyone to file to our traditional record keeping systems and become pseudo record keepers. We've all learnt over the years that doesn't work. And I think that as we go forward and the machine learning becomes stronger, we will be able to do a lot more in that space. But we're already doing a lot within that space of taking record keeping away from the users, doing that record keeping in place, and having the machine do all the categorization for classification for retention and disposal purposes. That's already there, and I can only see that getting more mature as we go further into the future.
Yeah, one of the things that we're super excited about, that I know we're working on, it's not released in product yet, but it is coming, is the ability for the machine to queue up for approval to the appropriate user at disposal. And using large language models to work out who those users are in an organization is going to be very interesting, and really changes, I think, the context of records management to be data centric versus classification centric. I mean, is that the kind of things you'd see out there?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, definitely taking it away and being able to do those things by automation. It takes, as we know, record keeping units and areas of the business are becoming smaller and smaller every day. And the people that are in the roles of record keepers are no longer our traditional record keepers, the people doing the filing, so to speak. It's more now about setting strategy and all of those kinds of things. So the way that this is going allows us to, as record keepers, get in and do that strategy work and not be so stressed about who's going to do the filing, because the machine will do that for us, and also do the whole process from beginning to end.
Terrific.
Okay. So we've got thank you for that, a few questions from the audience to come through. Starting with Tegan has asked if can I run it over Content Manager to help with application of disposal authorizations?
So do you mean within an actual record keeping system itself, Content Manager? Is that what she's talking about, maybe? So
yeah, I think I take that as the open text product, but let's be generic rather than talk specifically about those legacy products. I think many of them aren't integrated, and they'd be very difficult to integrate with Chat GPT. But I think there is some ability to export data from those systems and potentially have Chat GPT or other large language models provide some of that. And is that a pattern you're seeing a little bit, Lucy?
Not myself, not yet anyway, but it's not to say that it can't be done.
Yeah, I think the opportunity in this space across any of those platforms that are large data pools is to have systems that can integrate into them and then surface that data into a Chat GPT or some other large language model. So, Content Manager, etc., can be integrated through those tools, and then you can provide that capability. And it's certainly, we're seeing with our customers, where we're providing integration into legacy platforms like Objective and OpenText and FileNet and the rest of it via our connector framework, we can then leverage the application of disposal authorities from ChatGPT into that. And I think there are different integration points where that will be possible. But it's a great question, so thank you, Tegan.
Yeah.
Yep. All right. The next one, we might need to get Alex to clarify on this, but he's asked about the capability to decommission a system and extract rule sets and structure for use in a new system is an important part of choosing an EDRMS. If the LLMs and training is in the hands of RecordPoint, is that a danger of your customers? I'm assuming the training of our model and is that of a specific customer's model, and then is that shared, with other customers?
Yeah, another great question. Let's break things down a little bit. And I think this really, there are some risks around using large language models and privacy and some of the other implications. And it's a great topic to bring up. So again, thank you. Really what, let's talk generically about the industry, and then we'll talk specifically about what we've been doing here at RecordPoint. if you are a paid user be it Bard from Google or Chat GPT or Copilot from Microsoft, which is really just leveraging the Chat GPT OpenAI AI large language model. They do provide in their terms and conditions greater privacy. Now, on the free version, when you go in and just for full transparency, I think Lucy was demoing on the free version, but and we'll integrate our tooling into either. But on the free version, that will actually train the model. So, the kind of questions that are happening there on the free version, the reason they're offering it for free is they're using that for training and putting that in the data set. It does mean that there are some potential privacy implications. On the paid version, the terms and conditions are quite different. You do get geolocated data. Your data is guaranteed not to be mixed. You guarantee your data is separated. So that's the generic answer for large language models, and it really doesn't matter whether it's a Chat GPT or a Bard flavor or whatever you're buying. When it comes to RecordPoint, we go one step further. We really believe that you shouldn't commingle that data, even inside the model, with other tenants or other customers' data. So one of the things that is a core tenet of how we build our solution and a core tenet of what we are doing with large language models is that your model, as an extension of ChatGPT, is unique to you, and that data is not commingled. So whilst we can commingle the query in terms of we're going to get ChatGPT to understand your data against other people's data, it is fully heterogeneously separated. Happy to go into that in more detail. I've already gotten a bit technical by saying heterogeneously separated, and I apologize because I couldn't think of another word. But there are the other layers of abstraction that we can provide that wrap around that. And I know, Lucy, that's an area that has a question that's come up a lot generically about machine learning and thinking about those things. It is a concern out there about privacy, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And particularly with all of the recent things that have happened in the news around privacy and privacy breaches and whatnot, that is definitely something that's huge on everyone's mind. But yeah, like Anthony said in our tool, that it's unique to your organization, the machine learning. So it's really good.
And I really think when I've answered Alex's questions there, I've kind of jumped to the back of the question that Alex asked. There was, I think, the first part about decommissioning system and extracting the rules. Absolutely. The beauty, I think, of this, if we've dealt with that privacy issue, which is why I wanted to deal with that first, is once we're not commingling that data, we can then summarize that data. And summarizing, I think, is a very good way to describe how ChatGPT and others would do this. You could, in effect, summarize or stub out different data points that are in your existing system and then decommission it. It's a brand new area. There's actually some new types of AI coming out called interactive AI. We're going to do a whole other set of webinars on that in months to come, which is really the next evolution. If you're really into the ChatGPT and large language models, go and Google interactive AI. There's a whole bunch of academic research, but the interactive AI is going to allow us to fairly faithfully provide an accurate, auditable, provident set of summaries for legacy data. Super interesting area, but would help in that process of decommissioning. To come back to today's answer, though, there are ways to decommission, hold all that data in a provident, faithful way, and do that using large language models for summarization. And I think we've sort of seen again some of that in today's machine learning world, Lucy.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the biggest thing for me is what I have learned anyway is not to be scared of machine learning. And I think a lot of us as record keepers perhaps have been in the past a little bit skeptical of what it is, what it can do. Is it, going to take our jobs away, all of that kind of thing. It's definitely not going to take our jobs away. It's going to help us to be more effective in our jobs is what I see. And anything that happens in this space, I'm always willing to jump on board and see what it does because I'm a big fan of it. Anything that makes my life easier.
Now, as a technologist, I'm guilty of this as well. I do want to help the audience slightly. We interchangeably use these terms like large language model, AI, Chat GPT, machine learning. Some of those terms do represent something different, and some of those terms sometimes don't. how do you play that out? What's the hierarchy you have for that terminology? Because as a technologist, I'm really bad. I know what I mean when I say that. There are nuances of difference that aren't all that different. When a journalist publishes information, often I see them abuse the term. I'd love to hear from a records perspective. How do you kind of lay those different terms out and see that world?
I don't really lay them out, to be honest. I'm a bit like you, Anthony. I just use whatever comes to mind at the time.
I love you. This is why I love working with you, Lucy. That honesty around that approach. I guess for me, slightly, machine learning is an umbrella term, but it really is the math. Just represents turning information into a mathematical model that can be queried, versus say a large language model, which Chat GPT, Bard, etc., is an iteration of, are all live within the umbrella of AI. They're all artificial intelligence. The difference is machine learning is a mathematical representation of a model. In fact, theoretically, AI, the Chat GPT has machine learning components to it. The difference in a large language model and Chat GPT and others of that flavor is the model is very complex and has lots and lots of signals in it. Ridiculous billions of signals. But the big change is also the transformer, the ability to parse that plain English question that you asked and turn that into something the machine could get back the mathematical model from. So it is a whole next level of versioning, a whole next level of capability, but it is slightly different in our terminology. I just wanted to clear that up for the audience because I think it is confusing.
Yeah, and I think too, what you'll find is I probably tend to use the language mixed because I think about who I'm actually talking to. So if I'm talking to my friends at a barbecue, for example, I might use different language to if I'm talking to my colleagues at work. It really depends on who I'm talking to as to which terminology I use when I'm aware of who the audience is. Yeah, definitely.
You must have friends better than mine, because mine always tell me they don't understand what I do. So
yeah, I know, they just look at me vaguely, right? Nod and smile.
No, very good. Great. Well, there's a few more moments left here in our webinar. If there's any other questions, please pop them into the chat. I do have my final question. I'd like to know, Lucy, around, we've sort of talked about the impact to records management over the next 12, 18 months, 2 years, but where do you really see this going? These technologies are evolving pretty quickly. The reality is I'm now old enough. Someone probably asked me 10 years ago, I would have said something different, that these things take time to get into the industry. They take time to really get uptaken and get used. And it really, particularly in our world here in information management and records, there's a lot to get done, and funding and those sorts of things have to happen. But if you were to put your have your crystal ball out in front of you and think, 10, 15 years into the future or even beyond, what do you think the future looks like in this world?
Well, I think if we look even back at just the past, 10 to 15 years, 10 to 15 years ago, we were still paper-centric. We were definitely creating hybrid systems, if you like. We were creating records management for both our electronic and our paper records. If you move that forward to just 15 years, who would have thought that in a short period of time, such as 15 years, we would be mostly dealing with pure electronic records, very little paper. Paper is very much our legacy now. I don't think anyone that I know of is creating new records in a paper sense. So in that small amount of time we've come in that space, who knows where we will be in 10, 15 years time. But what I do see is that it will definitely be the machine doing all of the work for us, what I see is that grunt work kind of thing. So from, being able to take our information and classify it and give us lots of different information, probably more than what we can even dream of today. Like I know, for example, that at the moment we're starting to look at things within even Records 365, the RecordPoint product, privacy signals and things like that. That's just the beginning of the journey, to be able to identify things like that. So who knows where the future is going to take us, but I think it'll be very sophisticated, and it'll be able to help us be more aware of what things are, so that hopefully we keep our organizations out of the media, out of litigation, those kinds of things. So that's where I see it taking us.
Great, thanks, Lucy. We actually got one last question from the audience, and then we'll wrap up from there. When changes are made in records authorities and the classification, use of an LLM, I think the question is, when changes are made to record authority classification regulations around the use of LLMs, what's responsibility does RecordPoint have in incorporating those changes, and how do we kind of update our policy and our product from there? If I summarize the question correctly.
Yeah, that's another great question. We should definitely get I think people along to some of our roadmap sessions, and there's some really interesting pieces to this. But the answer is we are providing a capability, and this will be coming in the next couple of quarters. So watch this space, and certainly happy to provide beta access for anyone who's interested, where cited classification and industry-wide is going to be available to download in the data trust platform, the RecordPoint data trust platform. And that capability will also provide prompts that you get to choose for updates as they flow through. The same thing will then also be integrated into, or we expect, I should say, but we expect will be integrated into large language models to make further recommendations in gaps out of those industry-specific classification elements based on your data. So again, you will be prompted to decide whether or not to apply that. Now, I've seen, I want to carve Lucy out here because she hasn't seen this yet, but I've seen what some of our engineers have done in that space, and there's some super interesting elements coming. This probably news to you, Lucy, so I apologize for that. But it's such a great question. I did want to answer it because there's some super interesting changes there. And I think that's going to have a real impact on the ability to have the tool operating very smoothly, and really, operating for our users, where you have the opportunity to operate more as a pilot than someone, flying the plane, than someone having to turn the engine. Because I think today, a lot of records managers and a lot of people in the information governance are kind of turning the engine. We want to move that to, no, we're going to fly a plane rather than turn the engine. And that's the goal. Yeah,
absolutely.
With that, any closing remarks, Lucy, from you in terms of, how excited, because I know how excited you are about these changes and what's happening and what's coming down the pipe?
No, absolutely. What's really lucky for me is I get to come to work every single day and play with these tools. So I get to see these things happening. I get to be at the forefront of this, and being part of that is very exciting. And being able to then take that out and demystify that for my professional colleagues is a totally amazing opportunity that I get to have every single day.
No, great. And we, as I said earlier, it's such a joy to have you as part of the team, Lucy. So it's great to get that opportunity. And look, I would say to anybody out there that comes by either Filed Live or on this webinar, Ask Me Anything, Lucy is there as a resource for the community. So if you need to ask a question, you want to know something, and I know she does this anyway, but even as a part of RecordPoint, please reach out. She's more than happy to answer. It doesn't matter what system you're running. Doesn't matter what platform on it. I'm also happy to do the same, but Lucy has more skills and capability than me in this area. So go to Lucy. Look, thanks for joining us today, everybody who's made it on live onto the AMA. Thank you, Jen, for your moderation. Thank you, Lucy, for being my question victim. It was great.
No problem.
Certainly enjoyed the conversation.
Happy to join you anytime.